everybody, welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I know it's been a few weeks since I posted. I've been busy with the real life and a long trip down to South Florida. It was a nice family celebration and we had a good time down there. And I've been doing a bunch of troubleshooting and repairing things ever since I've gotten back. So finally back to doing lures and back in the lure shop and back to trying to perfect a good way of making a hollow body topwater frog. And I drew up the design for this thing about 3 weeks ago. Here's the original drawing. Now I have water tested this and it works pretty nice. It does have a little bit of a flaw and I'm going to show you what that is in a minute. But first, let's take a peek at the rotocaster and what I've done to it lately. Now for those of you who have been watching this and watched me build this already, which is essentially a 2-axis rotocasting machine that holds a lure mold, and when I turn it on, it spins in 2 axes. The center part spins inside the larger part that gets spun by a motor. Now originally I had 2 rectangular plates like this that held the mold between them, and that held the mold sort of horizontally across the inner square here. I then tried mounting these guys vertically on the inside square until finally I came up with this circular one. Now you guys must be wondering, why would I do all that? Well, my problem has been that I don't get a uniform distribution of the material. You can see this is really soft and the nose here is nice and firm and full of the rubber, while the outer skin is like super thin in some places and a little thicker in other places. And sometimes there's nothing in the front and way too much in the back. And so I've been trying to resolve that problem for a little while. And the reason I've made a circular mold clamp is so that I can rotate the mold. But if you look here on the inside bottom plate, you can see I've got some lines on a 45-degree and a 90-degree to the axis of rotation. And the idea was to experiment with different angles to see if it would help with that material distribution. And this is my latest one. And you can see the distribution is much, much better. It's a little bit heavier in the nose, but not enough to worry about. Now, one of the other major changes I made was a motor controller, so I can get this thing to rotate at the lowest speed possible and still have some variability. I got a lower RPM motor. This is a 20 RPM motor. I've got a motor controller, a DC motor controller, and with this I can actually get this thing to rotate at about 3 RPMs, 4 RPMs, and have it be steady. Because before I was just trying to manipulate the RPMs with the voltage by lowering the voltage. But what that does is it just makes the motor inefficient and a little bit erratic, so it tends to want to stop all by itself. So I built a little panel here to mount the switches. I've got a forward, stop, and reverse switch, and I've got a velocity knob here. And I did all that so that I could do all this experimentation and find out what was going to be the best speed and the best angle rotation. It's been a little bit of a journey, but I think we got to the point where we can make a better model of a good frog. Now we need to address the actual design of the lure. And while we're looking at the design, let me go ahead and show you how I rigged up the hook. I've got a double hook, just like a regular frog hook, and a twisted link here, and we'll go ahead and pull it out. There you go, simple as that. So here's what I think is the problem with this frog. First of all, it sits in the water really nicely, it retrieves really nicely. I think it looks pretty nice. But the problem is that it's not very weedless. It does get hung up here and there. And the reason for that is that I didn't shape the lure right. I actually gave it a little bit of a waist. It actually comes in here, while what it should do is come out. It should have a little bit of a bulge in the belly, the way this one does. What we're going to do is we're going to disassemble this one and we're going to make a mold of it. All right, so this little button that seals the belly is actually a weight. And having a little bit of weight in the back keeps the head up while you're retrieving it. And it also makes it a little easier to walk the dog with this. But I'm going to put this little plug back in and we'll make ours without a hole in the belly. All right, here's what it looks like impaled and ready to go into a mold box. So the idea is that these aluminum pegs are going to hold it up in the mold box. This way I don't have to use any clay. I'll just have this suspended and pour the silicone up to about the middle line.
So I decided to make the mold box out of some cardboard. It's easy to cut, it's free, and it'll glue up really nicely with some hot glue. I need 3 strips and 1 broad piece to use as a base. And just like that, we're ready to assemble it. Hot glue is great for making these mold boxes that are basically throwaways because it acts as a good glue. It gets hard and stiff and will hold the thing up really well. And it also acts like a good sealer. And hopefully it'll end up being leak-proof in the end. Now we need to drill some holes for those pegs that I put through the frog. This will hold it in there and keep it from either rising or sinking. Now I just need to glue in the little end panels, make sure they're square to the side walls and well sealed, because these could leak really easily. So I put plenty of glue on them and work a little bit of extra glue on the inside. Now for the hole in the end plate for the nose of the lure.
Alright, with the seams pretty much sealed, I hope, and the holes drilled to mount this thing, we just need to mount it. I'm going to go ahead and mount the back part first. And we'll poke it through one side and then the other. And then we can center the lure and make sure that it's nicely shaped. That looks pretty good. And I had to lower the holes because I was leaving a little bit too much distance from the bottom. I don't want the mold to be that thick. To capture the front. And there it is. Now we just need to pour right about halfway up to just partially embed the little metal rods.
Now 2-part molds need to have alignment keys to align the 2 halves of the mold. So I came up with this method. I'll be using cut off sections of bolts and I'll embed those in a little alignment plate, and that will sit right on top of the mold after I've poured the silicone in. I'm using a little piece of PVC board with a couple of tabs to keep it aligned on top of the mold. I'll just drill it out so those bolts will just barely screw into it by hand. So now it's just a matter of screwing these things in there and making sure that they're sticking out just the right amount so they embed themselves in the silicone. That looks pretty good. I think we're ready.
Alright, I'm using this little PVC board as a platform and I went ahead and leveled it. Just makes it easier to level. And I did that by shoving a little bit of clay underneath it. Now I can just set that on top and it's nice and level. And I've got the calculations done for the volume of the silicone. So next step is mixing and pouring. And I'm using this stuff. It gave me a lot of problems last time I used it with the clay bed. I'm hoping not using any clay will resolve all those issues. So I need a total of 90 milliliters, so I'll be mixing 45 of A, 45 of B. Went a little over, but that's okay. We'll just match it with this one. All right, now it's just time to mix it up and we'll pour it in there. The danger of doing it this way is that as you pour it up towards the belly, you'll trap some bubbles up along the belly. So the key is to do it really slowly. And you also can't get any on the lure itself, or you shouldn't anyway. So the idea is to keep it off the lure, but have it come up onto the bottom of the lure. Do it slow enough so any bubbles that get close to being stuck down there hopefully will roll out and not become a problem with the mold. And you know what? Let's go ahead and degas the silicone just to give us a little better chance of not having bubbles. And we'll let that go for like 3 or 4 minutes. We got plenty of working time. All right, looks like we're down to the last couple little bubbles popping off. I think we can go ahead and pour. And I did spray the inside of the box and the lure itself with a little bit of mold release spray just to be safe. All right, that should do it. I did cover up the pins a little more than I really wanted to, but that'll work just fine. All right, with everything poured, I can go ahead and put my key making contraption here. This will put little indentations in the mold that will act as keys to align the two halves later on. So I'm just gonna slip that down in there, hopefully not disturb it too much. All right, it's just a matter of waiting for that first half to set, and then we can pour the second half on top of it.
And we'll let this set overnight. All right, so it's been overnight. Let's see if this came out okay. Hopefully it doesn't completely stick. That would suck. All right, come on. What is going on? This is weird. This should not be stuck. Stuck. This is very strange. Nothing should be sticking. There's no reason for anything to stick, but it's sticking. What the heck? I don't want to destroy the mold because I got to build up on the walls. Oh man. Well, if you've been watching my channel, you know that I don't do anything rehearsed. Everything is experimented right in front of you guys. This is a new technique. I came up with it just for this video, and I might have screwed something up. I don't know what. Seems to be starting to come loose. Might just be suction. I don't know. Oh, there it goes. Man, I was stuck in there. But no, looks like we did okay. That's good news.
All right, so I figured out what had happened, why it was getting stuck, and that's because the silicone kind of came up onto the threads, just about one thread, and that was enough to bind it and hold it down. And I was actually breaking off little pieces of silicone that had been wrapped around the threads. I just went a little too deep with the bolts, making these alignment keys. All right, so now what I'm going to do is build up the walls on this, because we need to have a little bit more coverage. Instead of raising it with cardboard, I'm just going to bring it up maybe 1/16 of an inch or more with a little bit more hot glue. And that gives me just a little more height on the wall. And that's basically all I need. All right, all we have to do now is put a little bit of petroleum jelly, Vaseline, all over the set silicone. Make sure the silicone doesn't stick to itself, because silicone won't stick to anything except for silicone. And I definitely made these keys too deep. I don't know what I was thinking. It's a matter of coating all the surfaces so that the two halves of the silicone mold will separate once they're set. If I don't do this, when I pour the second half on there and it sets, it'll be just one solid block of silicone. And that would be a disaster. And we're mixing slightly less this time around, and that's because I've got the lure set asymmetrically inside the mold. There's a little more down inside the bottom half. So we're going to mix a total of 60 milliliters. And so I'll just mix it up, give it a few minutes of this mixing, not too much. It's a pretty small amount, and then I'm just going to pour it over. I don't think I'm going to have to degas this side of it. And I'll first drizzle silicone down into these little holes so that I know I won't get an air pocket in there. And I like to drizzle it on top of the body too, just to be sure we don't end up with bubbles right on top of the body. And I like to give it a few minutes to off gas. You can see it's nice and clear and no bubbles. We can go ahead and pour the rest. All right, looks like we got our volume calculations right. And we'll let this thing off gas. You can see the bubbles just coming to the surface and popping. And since it takes about 5 or 6 hours to set, most of those bubbles should disappear. All right, we're back. This is nicely set. And now we can tear the mold box apart, I hope. Looks like it's gonna come unstuck. The hot glue did a good job. All right, now let's open it up. Hopefully it opens up like it's supposed to. Oh yeah, these keys are way long. Look at that. Whew. All right, not bad. Not bad at all. All right, I'm gonna pull this thing out and prepare, and we're gonna go ahead and cast our first lure. First, I need to pull the pins out. Nose one, and these are all there so that when I do the actual pour, it'll form the hole right in the nose and of course across for the legs. And at the very bottom of this, I put another one right there, and that one is to form the hole for the hook. And when I go to cast it, I'll just embed that in there. Embed the front one and slide the back one back in. And these keys here are about 1/4 inch too long. They're going to be a little difficult to get in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and snip them so that they're just barely enough there to key in the location. And there you go. Now I can get it seated in there nicely. And before I go ahead and do the casting, I'm going to go ahead and coat the mold with some mold release. And I'll let that dry for a few minutes. And I'm not going to mix very much of this stuff. Just going to use about 5 grams of each of the 2 parts. Well, let's go 4.5. It's pretty close. And now we can just mix it up. I'm going to experiment a little bit with how much I put in there. Typically I'll fill half the mold, but this time I'm going to use a little less just to see if we get a nice even distribution and a nice thin one too, because I want it to really flex pretty nicely. Not too much, but enough to get out of the way so the hooks can dig in. That should do it. All right, we'll put it in here. Hopefully we didn't take too long here. I like to give it an hour at least before I start the process of demolding. All right, let's take a peek. And that looks pretty good. Not bad. All right, let's pull it out of there and see what we have. Looks pretty even. I could probably use a little bit more material. Still, a lot of it is going to the head, but I don't mind that too much. Let's do another one that has color on it. Because it's so cool in here, it doesn't really flow in the mold very well. So I'm going to go ahead and just microwave this stuff just for a few seconds to warm it up. And I'll give it 10 seconds. We'll see how that works. All right, that did it. Let's see. Oh yeah, I can feel that it's warm. I think that's going to do the job. All right, so since I'm going to go ahead and color this one, I'm going to use this powder pigment. So I'm going to mix the bright green with the black and get like a dark green, I hope. And before I start to blend them together, I'll go ahead and put the pigment in there. And I use very little, a little bit of black and a little bit extra of the green. All right, so what I ended up with is kind of a violet green. We're going to go with it. This whole coloring part is going to be another learning process. Set it nice and slow and get back to it as soon as this thing is set. So it should be about 35 minutes. The purple green one came out a little more purple. So I went ahead and did one in sort of a gold brown. And that's compared to the natural one on the bottom. So I want to make 2 more. One bright green and one pearl. And I really love the color shift in this thing. It goes from green to violet. Looks really cool. And I really learned how to get a good clean casting now. And what I'm doing is I'm heating up the actual lure mold in the microwave. It really makes a difference. This one I colored with a white pearlescent powder. That's looking pretty nice. And I kind of like the pearlescent look. And there's a nice hollow in there, plenty flexible. Before I assemble it, I want to try painting. Now this is just regular Createx airbrush paint, but I'm hoping it'll hold up, but I don't know. It may just flake off of this stuff. I'm just going to do as simple a pattern as I can think of. Nothing really elaborate, nothing that's going to take a lot of time, because I'm not sure if it won't be just flaking off the first time I put it in the water. That looks pretty good. So this is really just a test, and I'll keep you guys up to date how well this stuff holds up. Well, thank you for watching till the end, and thanks for all your patience these last few weeks. We'll be back in the shop and doing a more traditional build for the next video. Until then, I really appreciate all the comments and all the suggestions, and I'd be happy to chat about this build in the comments. Alright guys, I'll see you next week.